Good evening, class. I chose to do my chapter concept this week on understanding the interview process. This is something I recently just went through because I did just go through an interview, and I kind of hit some of these, so I'll be talking about it throughout my presentation. So there's a typical sequence of interviews versus a screening stage. It's where they filter out unqualified or others that not fit for the position. Then they move on to the selection stage, which where they will receive a job offer, interview with the higher executive, or the finals, and then the final stage, the company will try to sell you on a position. Like I mentioned, I did recently just go through an interview. I didn't quite make it to the final stage, but I did get through the screening stage. And the selection stage, sort of. I did do one interview with some managers, and then I did another interview with managers that were higher up. Unfortunately, I didn't get the position to move on to the final stage, but I think it's all basically the same type of interview process. Common types of interviews, we have the structured versus the unstructured. So structured are questions asked in a predetermined order. So these are questions that have been laid out prior to the interview, probably even starting. There's really no follow-up questions behind it. It's they ask the question and then they just kind of move on to the next one. And then the unstructured, open-ended interview questions. These are questions that are asked based on previous questions. So, for example, one of the questions that I was asked during my interview was how I handled a process prior, and when I answered the question, she wanted to know more in detail about that process and if it would be beneficial for the department that I was currently in. And next one is the panel and the group interviews. With panel interviews, it's one interviewee meets with several interviewers, so you'll be sitting there with a couple people. Could be a couple managers in the department or a couple people that maybe someone from HR sitting in on the interview as well, to just kind of discuss that kind of way. And then with a group interview, it can be a couple people on one side and then the managers on the other side as well. So it's several people interviewing as well as several people interviewing you. Um, in my first set of interviews that I recently just had, it was several people on one side and several people on the other. It was a very interesting concept. When I got the job that I currently have now, it was the same type of interview process, and I wasn't sure about it because I felt like um, if you didn't answer the question first, then you're trying to think of ways to enhance the question that they already asked. And if the answer was the same, it kind of made it more difficult. And then, of course, we have behavioral, situational, working, and stress interviews. In a behavioral interview, you're asked to describe how you handle situations from your past. So that's kind of like the interview that I just recently had. They kind of asked me situations that I've done in the past and how I handled them. Um, in a situational interview, it's more in a situation where you ask to explain how you hypothetical situations. So that would be more like, how would you handle, I mean, I know this is way out of there, but how would you handle if the roof was on fire? What would you do? Um, and then you would answer based on your things. And then working would be the perform a job related activity. So they might have you do something on a computer to show that you are capable of doing the process that they are requesting. And then of course you have the interview media. So in my very first interview, before I had the group panel interview, I had a phone interview, and I had someone call me and they asked me some questions. It was kind of like a pre-screening process. They asked me some questions regarding my qualifications and things of that nature. So it was more of a one-on-one thing. One of the things that they emphasized in the book is that you make sure that you treat it as seriously as you would a face-to-face interview. Sometimes when you're on the phone, you can get a little um, relaxed and forget that the situation that you're doing is it's more formal and you need to treat it as such. And then when you're interviewing via email or IM, it's kind of nice because it does give you that time to prepare for how you're going to respond and make sure the response that you do is a good response and it's as accurate as possible. I've never had a email or IM interview. I think that would be interesting to see how that works. Only because, like the book mentions, you get to take your time on those. Make sure that you answer correctly. Make sure everything's good to go on those. You don't have that pressure from previous interviews where it could be more. You gotta answer right away. So what do employers look for in an interview? Basically, they want to answer two primary questions. Can the candidate handle the responsibilities? Are you going to be able to handle the job that we have presented for you? Is this something that's going to fit you? Will you be a good fit for us? I mean, sometimes um, you will see a candidate who seems very qualified for the position, but something, i.e., personality or something that they display is not making you feel like that they would be a good fit for the position. And then, of course, the pre-employment testing and backgrounds. This attempt to provide objective and quantitative information about a candidate's skills, attitudes, and habits. Um, it's just a good way for you to know, what you're working with, who you're working with, and how to proceed further. So like I said, I just recently went through an interview and I just went through this process. And after reading this, I kind of got a better understanding of why they went with what they went with and why they did what they did. So I just want to take your time. Of course, thank you guys for listening, and I hope you guys all have a good evening.